Welcome to episode number 6 of the Wheels and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Ben Durham, and today we have Dan Cameron on as our guest. He's a father, scientist, musician, and advocate for safer streets. He rides his bike regularly in London, Burlington, and Hamilton, and has lived and cycled in Toronto, Washington, D.C., London, UK, and Winnipeg. We sat down in Doidge Park over in Old North here in London, Canada to chat about a bunch of things like how he lives in London but commutes by a combination of collapsible Brompton and a Via Rail train all the way to Hamilton and back. Not only that, we cover how he travels, biking in the rain, hygge, cobblestone, and a bunch more stuff, including school streets, which is actually what encouraged me to chat with Dan in the first place. Speaking of that, let's get right into it.
I'm Dan Cameron.
And we ran into each other over at a ward meeting, and what you were saying was really interesting to me, so I obviously had to get your information. And then we went on a ride-along just now, and we covered a few different things. You mentioned you work in Hamilton, but we are here in London, Ontario. Can you tell me a little bit more about your commute? Because you have your Brompton over there.
That's right. That's a key part of the commute. I have the greatest commute combination of a train and folding bike. So I'm a scientist. I work at McMaster. I live in London here with my family. I luckily can work from home 3 days a week, so I take the train in Tuesdays and Thursdays. I ride the folding bike, the Brompton, down to the train station from Old North. Then I fold it up, put it on the train. It's very convenient, easy. I get off in Aldershot, and it's about a 35-minute ride from there to McMaster. The cycling infrastructure on that ride is not bad. It's not excellent. There's some stretches are better than others. Overall, I'd say it's good, and I enjoy it. But that combination of the train, being able to just park yourself on the train, if it's on time, and work, and drink my coffee, and then I still get my bike ride in. It's a nice combination. I like it.
So that just sounds so delightful. That's the word for it. It sounds awesome. How do you get down to the train station? Do you bike down as well?
Yep. I bike down Victoria Street to Colborne. Then I take the Colborne bike lane. It's painted north of Colborne, which I talked about a little bit on our ride along. And then south of Oxford, it's protected. It's got the bollards there down to Dundas Street, which has then got the cycle lane or cycle path there.
Yeah, which is
clearance.
It's mostly protected up until you hit Dundas Place, and then it turns into cobblestone. Which thoughts on cobblestone on your Brompton?
Fine. I would like to see more of it. I would like to see it even more pedestrianized and a longer stretch of Dundas. But I'll take it for what it is. It has what I noticed, it has the intended effect of making it feel and look to motorists like a place that people might be riding their bike and walking, so they don't tend to fly down that stretch as much as they might otherwise, as if it was just a normal paved road. The cobblestones, I don't mind it. It's not too bad. It's not like bumpy cobblestones, We're not talking medieval city in France or something.
Yeah, I was in Montreal. They have a few cobblestone things, and it's like, oh, okay, this is cobblestone.
That's different, yeah.
So, okay, the pedestrianized Dundas Place, that you go through there, then you...
Then turn onto Clarence, turn left, and go down there. There's some construction there at York, but it takes you right to the train station.
There we go.
Right in.
And then you collapse your bike.
Yep.
Ooh, I know there's different times for Brompton users. How fast can you collapse it? What's your record?
I haven't timed it, but pretty fast. What I tell people, because people are so curious about it, it's a weird looking thing. People at the train station are always like, look at that. And they see me fold it up. What I tell them is 30 seconds to fold it up. It takes a little longer. Via requires that you have any bike needs to be in a bag. And so there's a little rain cover that I put over it. That's the lengthiest part, is getting that unfolded and zipping it awkwardly over the thing. It's fast. I haven't practiced to try to get my time. And I know there's some super hardcore Brompton riders out there. I'm not in that scene yet, so we'll see. But it's so convenient. It's light. It's a pleasure to ride compared to some other folding bikes that I tried. It feels good to be on. It doesn't feel like a weird bike with 16-inch wheels. It feels like a normal bike, so I recommend it.
Awesome. And I'm looking at it. I'll take a clip. I will put it in. Normally I don't do this, but in the video podcast portion, I'm going to just take a shot of it because it is nice.
You should get a fee from Brompton then if you're going to do that great free advertising for them.
Yes. I'm staring at that internal gear hub, and I know how much of a pleasure that is because you don't have to do anything with it. There's a lot of good happening.
There's a lot of good about that bike. I like it.
Okay, so you get on the Via Rail. You already kind of explained that. Oh, actually, do you get any work done while you're on the train?
Yeah. No, I like it. The train's a great work environment, I find. Open your laptop. I bring my coffee, bring a little breakfast, and it's like an hour and 3/4 between London and Aldershot. So you can get a lot of work done. You know, the days I go in, I get a lot more done. They're very long days. I don't see my kids very much, so there's big downsides to it. But, you know, the day starts at 7:30 when I'm sitting on the train. So that's different than dropping the kids off at daycare and school, coming back. Okay, now I need a second coffee. Now it's 10 o'clock by the time I'm really starting to think about work. So it's a different vibe.
That's so cool. I love are you familiar with the word hygge?
No.
It's a Danish word.
Oh, yeah.
Hygge.
Yes.
It is like my favorite thing. And that happened today because we had thunderstorms, torrential downpour today, and yet we are now outside because that's how weather works. A lot of people say, oh, you can't bike in on, rainy days. This morning, I probably wouldn't have been biking or driving, really. Like,
it was a downpour. That was serious.
It was a serious downpour.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I could ask you how you handle like the weather, etc. And you use studded tires.
Studded tires in the winter, although this winter you didn't need them, and maybe we'll never need them again with climate change around here. I wear rain pants, rain jacket, and then leather shoes if it's seasonal, or just sandals like this that can get wet, and that's good enough. One thing that's nice about the Brompton is the fenders, the mud guards, go right down low to the ground, so you get very little splashback. So for even just with kind of hiking shoes, that kind of thing, it has to be really a downpour to get your feet soaked. So so for that, and then in the winter, it's hard layers, you know, you don't want to get too sweaty, and that's usually the thing that you overdress because it's cold out, but then you start moving your body and you're soaked by the time you get somewhere. So I usually wear a raincoat through the winter with then like thin merino wool over top of whatever else I'm wearing.
I have to say that I'm glad to hear someone else say that because I always say that, the hardest thing about winter biking is overheating. And people are like, wait, what? What are you talking about? It's like, like the amount of overheating that happens, like you have to really regulate yourself. And that is my favorite thing about the e-bikes is headwinds is why I bought it. And then in the winter I realized, oh, it's an air conditioner.
Right.
It's like you can decrease the amount of oomph that
you don't have to put your body into it in the same way.
Exactly. Yeah. And then when you start to cool down, you start pedaling a little bit harder again. You can just fool around with it. In your case, you have a nice relatively short commute over to the train. So that's pretty good.
So that's just 12 minutes from home to the train, and then from Aldershot station to McMaster is about 35 minutes. It's a whole route. I've just found some new kind of areas I can go that take me off the busier roads. 35 minutes or 40 minutes if there's a strong headwind or serious weather or something like that. But I like that duration of a ride because it's enough time that you're really kind of like clearing your head a little bit. You can think through your day. You can, I'm not racing usually unless I'm really running late or something. So it's not a workout. You're just outside. You can let your mind go. And like most people, you end up way too addicted to your phone. And this is a chance that I don't check my phone if I'm riding my bike or not if necessary. So I like that ride for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess to finish off my hygge thing, the Hygge is, you're in the train, and especially I would say in the winter, you're in nice cozy vibes inside, you're working and you're sipping your coffee and you have your like breakfast. Oh,
it's great. I hadn't thought of the hygge vibe of the Via Rail commute. And sometimes it's, they're late sometimes, or people are, stressed on the train. It can be not only relaxing, but it does have that vibe. It is comfortable. I like it overall. And what's the comparison? Sit on the 403 for 90 minutes of completely wasted time. It's a shorter drive. If I go door to door, it's 90 minutes rather than like door to door 3 hours of train and cycling. But it's so much less enjoyable, and I haven't used that time. The 3 hours taking the train and cycling, I'm working most of that.
You're getting a little workout in. You're getting a little bit of you time.
Yeah.
You are then, spending a little bit of time waiting for the train. And then you get on the train. But what you said, it takes you 3 hours. But actually, if you're doing some work and catching up, that's like people people might, I don't know,
Right.
do some scrolling or something otherwise, or like where they shouldn't be. I have literal footage where we were in Thailand and just the drivers there, because it's such a car-centric, what I'm going to call a hellhole. It's really, really genuinely beautiful, very nice, but they need better public transit because everyone hates driving. It's the second worst amount of traffic in the world and congestion, etc. And the taxi drivers and Uber people, or the Grab there, they're just on TikTok scrolling and like on Facebook, and it's almost debatably safe. Those words have never come out of my head because you're not moving at all. And then finally they inch forward about 4 feet. Yeah. And then they continue waiting. And I'm like, why am I in here? And we took public transit after that.
It reminds me of India. I lived in India for a year in this busy city, and the traffic it might be the worst country for traffic. It's just unbelievable. And there were times at which I thought like, oh, it's just different. You know, it's a different vibe, but you just get used to it. Everyone just uses their horn instead of looking in mirrors. And it works. And people get around, and there's all different types of vehicles. And then later I read that actually it's also the worst in terms of traffic fatalities. So yes, it's just different, and it's worse in terms of safety. So, you know, it's good to experience different versions of car culture around the world, I think. But yeah, I'm glad I experienced that, and I'm glad I don't live in that car culture either.
Yeah, I actually think that I started getting, like, I was on my bike way before, when it made sense financially for me to be on a bike. I would like go to college and I'd bike and lock up with a cable lock. Never do that. Please don't do that. I don't know how my bike did not get stolen.
Right.
And but then in 2018, like, I realized, like the e-bike bit, yes, it just kind of changed things because it really replaces a second car or a car depending on your situation. So anyway, okay, on to the next bit here.
Sure.
So we covered who you are, what you do, how you get to work. Already, that was genuinely interesting. Like, that just, it's so cool to hear someone like taking the train to Hamilton and not being forced to drive. And also, to anyone who thinks that might sound, I don't know, different, it is, but also it's one less car.
Yeah.
And also then you'd have to pay for parking, etc. I realize the train also costs, but hey.
Train's expensive, cars are expensive, the upkeep, the maintenance, and the buying it in the first place, the insurance, the fuel. So yeah, I think, and then I mean the externalized costs of climate change that we just kind of accept. It's good to avoid those as well. And there's a lot of gains. Cycling, you feel better. I enjoy it. Almost every time I get on a bike, there's a feeling of like, oh yeah, this is great. Very few days where that isn't the case, even if it's raining. Like, it's just a pleasant activity to do.
You can dry if you're biking in the rain. A lot of people are like, oh, are you going to melt? No. Right. Well, they don't put it that way, but I do. Like, you're not going to melt.
Right.
So no. On a ride along, we were just saying like, or I was saying like, it just is like swimming through the air. I love it. It just feels so nice.
Yeah.
So now that we've covered all of the commuting and your day-to-day life, there's one missing part there, which is you have kids and you bring them to school. And one of the things that really stood out, one of those.
They both were.
At the ward meeting is you were talking about how you were trying to get safe streets to close off have a safe street that's closed off to vehicular traffic during drop-off and pickup times, which it was in the back of my head. I was trying to figure out the words to it. I was actually going to stand up and say that as well, but you actually have the lived experience. I don't. Yeah,
no, it's one of the, School Streets is the name of this program or this thing you can do, which I'll explain. But it's an example, and there are others that I talked about at the ward meeting, and others of of relatively inexpensive engineered changes, change the design of infrastructure and roads and ways we get around so that we make it safer through changing people's behavior implicitly, rather than saying, okay, we're going to make a new law and now we require some enforcement of it that's never going to happen. Or we need only massive new infrastructure, like a bike lane on every road. Like, this is, not realistic. But ultimately what we want is a safe neighborhood. You mentioned like, oh, this other part of my life, I have children. So I walk them to daycare and I walk them to school, which are both in the neighborhood. We live in a residential neighborhood. There's a ton of young families around with similar situations, from babies, to toddlers, young children, middle-aged children, older children. And it doesn't feel nearly safe enough to have them out on the roads riding their bike, even if they're competent cyclists, because people use these roads as ways to get from A to B rather than ways just to get home, and if they live in that neighborhood. So people are cutting through on our street to get between Adelaide and Victoria, or Adelaide and Richmond primarily.
I've heard
it
it called
too fast.
Rat running.
Yeah, the rat run, or that they want to avoid the bad traffic on the busier streets that they're supposed to be driving on, and so they come on these. I understand that. I hate when I'm driving to be stuck in traffic too. But this is where, as a community, as a society, we've designed things so that this is the natural thing for them to do. We can design things for that not to be the case. So if you make it harder for them to get into the neighborhood, you can only turn right when you're coming in from these busy streets when you're coming into the neighborhood. You have a bump out at every single intersection, so you never can get that much momentum with a huge, open, straight, wide road directly in front of you. There's always going to be these things. Implicitly tell the driver they need to not go too fast, rather than putting up a sign for 40 kilometers an hour, which is still too fast, by the way, which people can just ignore. So this is what I'm in favor of: realistic solutions to change behavior, so that it's safer to have children and anyone, any age and any ability and any mobility type, in a neighborhood where they live, getting from where they live to the school or from where they live to the grocery store. This feels like it should be a no-brainer. And it's really not straightforward, unfortunately. So the school streets thing that you mentioned, this is where you just simply close down the road in front of a school where the drop-offs and pickups take place to cars. You don't let cars come into that area for those periods. So it could be just 20 minutes at a time in the morning and in the afternoon when kids are coming to and from school. You encourage people to have their children walk or roll themselves to school, or ride themselves to school, or walk with their kids. Or if you need to be driving them, then dropping them off just a block away and they can walk from there. It makes for less mixing of child pedestrians and cars in the exact same physical location, crossing roads together, and it gets very chaotic. Almost every school has this situation in North America of way too many cars at drop off. People are in a rush, kids are getting out, there's chaos. It takes way too long when you're driving as well. And at least in some neighborhoods, but I think globally we can make this the case that you just encourage people to not drive their kids to school. And if they do, it's still safer by implementing school streets. We tried to do this. We had a whole pilot program set up to try it at Old North School last year. Allison Miller through the city was just dedicated to this, and she really worked it through the system there, which was no small feat. She had to talk to the legal department and transportation department, get everyone on board. We talked to the city councilor multiple times, to the principal. We had a whole system, a whole team of parent volunteers ready to come, be there physically in the mornings and afternoons with the barriers and to set them up. Unfortunately, it was killed at the 11th hour. I think there were some people who were opposed to it who made their voices known, and the school board and the city, I think, were fearful of
legal action.
Maybe legal action, I don't know. At least even animosity and fighting and some feeling of like a political battle in the schools. They wanted to avoid that, which is well-intentioned, but frustrating to not affect change when it was a very small thing we were going to do, a 3-week period where you have to stop just over there to drop your kid off rather than right in front of the school.
That was the
and
scope?
That's too much.
3 weeks. That was the pilot project?
It was a 3-week pilot project. It was going to be, the HEAL lab at Western, who are like just world-class researchers of urban design and of active transportation rates and this exact kind of thing. They had already done some kind of pre-measurements of what's the air quality, what are the rates of active transportation and car use and all these things. They were going to do a pre-post study on it. It was all set up, and I hope to revive it. And I know a number of parents, there's a whole group of us that were pushing for this. So we'll try to get it going again. And it's understandable. People, when it feels like they're being forced to change and something that they didn't choose, then they get their backs up. And we all do. That's human nature. So it also speaks to me about the need to get people on board to listen to what their concerns are and be thoughtful about what those concerns are and how to persuade them and to bring their concerns into consideration. This is a program that's been done in other jurisdictions. Many schools have done this in other places. Vancouver, London, England, busy city, right? If it's doable in these other places, I'm sure it's doable in this very walkable neighborhood like Old North.
And I'm trying to phrase it correctly, but it's not losing anything. These drivers, the people who are against this happening, I find it very weird that they think they're losing something because they're actually gaining less congestion. They're gaining their time back. They're gaining the safety of their children. They're going to save the frustration of like, oh, like, did you get your bag? This, that. There's no rush. It's dispersed. We were saying this earlier.
Yep.
It's dispersed along a larger area. And if you know that you're dropping your child off into a safe area, into a safe street, you know that no one else, except for maybe some exclusions, because there are some mobility problems, there's school buses, etc. There may be a vehicle or two in there, but because there's just one or two, it's no longer it's not a rat race. It's just not the congestion. And so the congestion is dispersed, and then you drop off your kid, you wave by.
If you need to drive, and some people do, if your kid,
Yep.
can't walk for some reason to school, that's okay. Of course we need to accommodate these people.
For sure.
And for even if you just say, no, I really want to drive. Who am I to say you can't do that? You can't go right in front of the school. All of these people coming into this one small area at one time. And again, this mixing of child pedestrians and vehicles, large vehicles. Some are going too fast. Some are unpredictable. Some are not signaling. Some are coming through trying to get from A to, for the rat race, as you call it, or a rat run.
Yeah.
This mixing is just nonsensical. And everyone agreed with that the status quo was unacceptable. They felt like this would be too much, but I need to get my kid off to school on my way to work. That's the only way this works. And who am I to tell them that, oh, your kid can walk that distance if they feel like, no, that's too far for their age? There are all these creative solutions to these kinds of things, like a walking school bus. So get the neighborhood kids together. The older ones can lead the younger ones, and they all walk together. And grown-ups can go with these. So it doesn't take all of us walking. If you need to get to work, then your kid goes off with the walking school bus or a bike bus where you bike together on the road. So it's safe because there's lots of grown-ups as part of it, and you can as being part of a big group, that it ends up being safer. So there's all kinds of alternatives to driving your kid to school. And the Active and Safe Routes to School program run by Public Health that I mentioned earlier, they have a whole series of actions that a school can take, that families can take to encourage this and to try new things to get out of the car. I think a lot of people would prefer to walk, but they feel like it's not safe to do so, or they don't have enough time. And so it takes some encouragement, and it takes some concrete ideas about like, oh, these are the alternatives that might work for you, and being patient and listening to people and time and trying again, even though it failed the first time. So, we'll keep trying different things. And ultimately, if there was just less of a need for it because the streets were just safer, so if we had systemic things in the community and in the city so that there were fewer cars, especially in residential neighborhoods, and that they went slower, then it wouldn't be such a concern if you needed to drive your kid. And more people would just implicitly feel safe with their kid walking to school because there's fewer cars around.
Which then has a compounding bit where more and more people choose to not have to, because they're not forced to, drive.
Right.
And so then you have safer streets, and it snowballs from there. That's the word I was looking for, snowballing. I'm very happy with this. This is just
great. Very
good chats.
Well, it's good to get a range of thoughts about it.
Exactly. So. And you come from like a research background anyways, so.
Yeah, I'm a scientist, a cognitive neuroscientist, so very different than, it's not related to active transportation or cycling policy or anything like that. But I think being a scientist, there's a certain pragmatism and there's a certain way of thinking about data and statistics and probability, and that's quite related to policy as well. So it gets in there. It's part of who I am.
And if it's neuroscience, I know there's tons of subcategories there, and I don't even know what those might be. However, there's the psychological aspect to all of this, where those people who vehemently opposed this happening were fearful. it sure sounds like it. I might be wrong, but they're
Yeah.
like, I don't want this change because X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And it might be even as small as, I don't want to be inconvenienced because this is silly. Or there's so many different reasons, but there's some psychological reasons for that.
Yeah, I think the psychology of a lot of this stuff is relevant. This is not my expertise as a scientist by any stretch, but like how we feel about this, behavioral change. Like there's a whole world of research on like how to get people to change their behavior, punishing people, telling them that they're bad, that they're wrong, that they just must hate the environment, or they don't care about kids' lives. Like those things are patently untrue, first of all, for most people, and it's so unpersuasive because how would you feel if someone said these things, you know? Like people get their backs up when they're told they're bad. That's human nature. Like, so getting people on board to create change is a challenging process because it's easy to feel like, well, I'm right about this. And if you disagree with me, you must be wrong. So like, I don't really want to listen to you anymore. But if everyone hates your idea, it's not going to happen. Like we live in a community and
we live in a society.
We do. And I think along the way, you hear this from a lot of people that you end up like, actually, the more you listen to the people who were, you know, your opponents or adversaries, you end up with a better product at the end, even when they didn't expect to. They were so sure they were right. So I try to, you know, remind myself of that as well with these things. But it's, you know, been a long time that I've been, you know, that cycling's been my primary transportation. So it's hard not to see car culture, as we were talking about earlier. And I feel very strongly about a lot of these things. But, you know, you try to be humble about it and you try to talk to people and listen and consider that, you know, okay, not everything has to happen at once. It's not going to be the perfect design right away. You just keep talking to people, keep pushing, and we'll see where it goes.
We'll finish it off there because you need to get going.
Sure.
This was a great chat. I would love to
Enjoyed
bring
it.
in... I'm glad that you also enjoyed finding a park bench to sit on and then chatting
Very
with
pleasant.
two nice microphones in
Yep.
front of your face.
The local playground teenagers knew right away that we were podcasters. I heard them.
They came by, they're like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
A podcast?
Yeah.
Yep. No, it's just those little community bits and seeing people out and about it's just all great. And then being able to do this here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I enjoyed
Good.
it.
Yeah.
It's great to chat with you.
Yeah. Thank
Bring
you
along for the
very
ride.
much. So, all right. Well, thanks very much for watching. Bye. Or listening.